The rain came down hard that Tuesday afternoon, turning the streets into rivers of gray water. At the corner of Maple Street, underneath a small bus stop shelter, a little girl sat all by herself. Her name was Sophie, and she was only 7 years old. Sophie pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders, but it didn't help much. The cold wind found its way through anyway. She kept checking the old phone her grandmother had given her last Christmas, but the screen stayed black. Dead battery. She'd tried to call her mom at least 20 times before it died. School had let out 2 hours ago. Sophie remembered standing with the other kids, watching them leave one by one with their parents. Mrs. Chun, the crossing guard, had asked if she was okay. Sophie had nodded and said her mom was coming soon. She didn't want anyone to worry. But now even Mrs. Chun was gone, and the street was empty except for cars rushing past, their wipers working hard against the rain. Her backpack sat next to her on the wet bench. Inside were her math homework, a half-eaten sandwich from lunch, and a library book about space. Sophie loved space. She wanted to be an astronaut someday, or maybe a scientist who studies stars. Her teacher said she was really good at science, the best in the class. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, she just wanted her mom. Sophie knew her mom was probably stuck at work. That happened sometimes. Her mom worked at the hospital, cleaning floors and bathrooms. It wasn't a fancy job, but her mom always said honest work was nothing to be ashamed of. Last week, her mom's car had broken down, and they'd been taking buses everywhere since then. Maybe that's why she was late. Maybe the bus broke down too. A black car slowed down as it passed the bus stop, then stopped completely about 20 feet away. Sophie's heart jumped. Her mom had always told her never to talk to strangers, never to get in a car with someone she didn't know. She pressed herself against the back of the shelter. Trying to look small, the back door of the car opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, wearing an expensive-looking suit and carrying a briefcase. He had gray hair at his temples and looked like the businessman Sophie sometimes saw on TV. He walked toward the shelter slowly, holding up his hands like he didn't want to scare her. "Hey there," he said, his voice gentle. "Are you okay? You've been sitting here a while." Sophie didn't answer at first. She'd been taught not to talk to strangers, but she'd also been taught to be polite. "I'm waiting for my mom," she finally said, her voice small. The man nodded. He didn't come any closer. "That's good. Is she running late?" Sophie felt her eyes getting hot with tears, but she blinked them away. "Her phone must be off." "Mine died." The man looked at her for a long moment, then at the rain, then back at her. "Listen, I'm going to make a call, okay? Just to make sure you're safe. What's your name?" "Sophie." "Okay, Sophie." "I'm David. I'm going to call the police, not because you're in trouble, but because that's what adults are supposed to do when a kid is alone like this. They'll help us find your mom. Is that okay?" Sophie thought about it. Her mom had told her that if she was ever really scared or lost, police officers were safe people to ask for help. She nodded slowly. David took out his phone and stepped back a bit, giving her space. He spoke quietly to someone, explaining the situation. Sophie heard him give the address of the bus stop. When he hung up, he looked at her again. "They're sending someone. Should be here in about 10 minutes. In the meantime, do you want to stay dry? There's a coffee shop right across the street. We can go together, stay where people can see us, and I'll buy you something warm to drink while we wait. Your choice, though. If you want to stay here, that's fine, too." Sophie looked at the coffee shop. She could see people inside through the big windows, sitting at tables and talking. It did look warm in there, and she was really cold. "Okay," she said quietly. They walked across the street together, David matching her slow pace. Inside the shop, the warm air felt like a blanket. David pointed to a table right by the window where they could see the bus stop. "That way you can see if your mom shows up," he said. Sophie ordered hot chocolate, and David got coffee. While they waited for the drinks, David didn't ask a lot of questions. He just talked to her like she was a regular person, not a little kid. He asked what grade she was in, what her favorite subject was. When Sophie said science, his whole face lit up. "No kidding?" "What kind of science?" "Space stuff, mostly." Stars and planets. Did you know that there are more stars in the universe than grains of sand on all the beaches on Earth? David smiled. I did know that, actually. Pretty amazing, isn't it? What do you want to be when you grow up? An astronaut. Or maybe someone who builds robots for space missions. Sophie wrapped her hands around the warm cup of hot chocolate. My teacher says I'm really good at math and science, but we don't have computers at home to practice on. No computer? Sophie shook her head. Mom says maybe next year when she saves up enough. We have to pay rent first and food and stuff like that. David nodded slowly, like he was thinking about something important. Before he could say anything else, Sophie saw flashing lights outside. A police car pulled up near the bus stop. They went back outside and a police officer walked over to meet them. She was a woman with kind eyes who introduced herself as Officer Rodriguez. She asked Sophie some questions about her mom, where she worked, what her phone number was. Sophie answered everything she could remember. Your mom's going to be so relieved, Officer Rodriguez said. I'm going to call the hospital right now and track her down. It took about 15 minutes. Sophie sat in the coffee shop with David and the police officer, watching the rain. David told her about some of the science projects his company was working on, and Sophie forgot to be scared for a little while. Then Sophie saw her. Her mom running down the street, not caring about the rain, her work uniform soaked through. Sophie jumped up and ran outside, and her mom grabbed her in the tightest hug ever. Sophie, baby, I'm so sorry. They made me work a double shift and said I'd lose my job if I didn't stay. And then my phone died and the bus took forever. And the car still won't start. Her mom was crying and talking at the same time, holding Sophie's face in her hands, checking to make sure she was okay. I'm okay, Mom. Mr. David helped me. And Officer Rodriguez. Sophie's mom looked up at David, and for a second, Sophie thought her mom might yell at him. But instead, her mom just said, "Thank you. Thank you for staying with her." David just nodded. I'm glad she's safe. That's all that matters. The police officer talked to Sophie's mom for a few minutes, making sure everything was okay. Then David walked back to his car, got in, and drove away. Sophie watched the car disappear around the corner. Who was that man? Her mom asked. I don't know, Sophie said. He was just nice. As they walked to the bus stop to catch the bus home, Sophie didn't know that the man in the black car couldn't stop thinking about her. She didn't know that he'd just made a decision that would change everything. She just knew she was safe, she was with her mom, and tomorrow she'd go back to school and learn more about stars, but sometimes one moment can change the whole direction of a person's life. And that rainy Tuesday afternoon was about to become one of those moments. Not just for Sophie, but for everyone around her. David couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about Sophie sitting alone in the rain, about her worn jacket and dead phone, about the way she'd tried so hard not to cry. He'd built a tech company worth billions, made deals that changed entire industries. But he couldn't stop thinking about one 7-year-old girl at a bus stop, around 2 in the morning. He got out of bed and went to his home office. He opened his laptop and started searching. He typed in the name of Sophie's neighborhood, and what he found made his chest tight. The statistics were worse than he'd imagined. Nearly 40% of kids in that area lived below the poverty line. The schools were overcrowded and underfunded. Most families didn't have reliable transportation. There were almost no after-school programs, no tutoring services, nothing to help kids like Sophie reach their full potential. He spent hours reading reports and articles. He learned about working parents who had to choose between keeping their jobs and picking up their kids. About talented students who fell behind because they didn't have computers at home. About families one car repair away from financial disaster. When his assistant arrived at 8 the next morning, David was still at his desk, surrounded by printed papers and empty coffee cups. I need you to do something for me, he said. Quietly. I need information about a family. His assistant, Patricia, had worked with him for 15 years. She knew when he had that look in his eyes, nothing would change his mind. What kind of information? Just the basics. I'm not trying to invade anyone's privacy. I just need to understand their situation better. It took 2 days? Patricia came back with a folder that David read 3 times, each time feeling more determined. Sophie's mother, Rebecca, was 31 years old. She'd lost her husband in a construction accident 4 years ago. She worked as a custodian at County General Hospital during the day, making barely above minimum wage. 3 nights a week she cleaned offices downtown to make ends meet. She had 3 kids, Sophie, a 5-year-old boy named Tyler, and a 9-year-old daughter named Nina. Rebecca had been late picking up Sophie because her supervisor forced her to work a double shift at the last minute. If she'd refused, she would have lost her job. Her car had finally died after 200,000 miles and she couldn't afford to fix it. The family lived in a 2-bedroom apartment that cost almost 70% of her income, but there was more. David learned that Sophie wasn't just good at science. She was exceptional. Her teachers said she had the highest test scores they'd seen in years. She asked questions that surprised even veteran teachers. One had written a note saying Sophie had remarkable potential that deserves every opportunity to flourish. The problem was simple. Sophie had potential but no resources. And there were probably hundreds, maybe thousands, of kids just like her in that neighborhood. David called his foundation director that afternoon. I need to set up a meeting. I want to start a new program. What kind of program? Support for working families. Real support. Not just throwing money at the problem, but actually helping people build stable lives. His director was quiet for a moment. David, we already have several programs like that in other cities. What makes this different? This one starts with one family. We perfect the model with them, learn what actually works, then scale it up. I want to help the family I met, but I want to use what we learned to help everyone in that neighborhood. That's very hands-on for you. Usually you prefer to stay behind the scenes. David looked at the papers scattered across his desk. I know, but this feels different. This feels important. Over the next week, David put together a plan. He talked to experts in poverty reduction, education, workforce development. He consulted with people who'd actually lived through financial hardship, not just studied it. He wanted to understand what families really needed, not what wealthy donors thought they needed. The plan that emerged was comprehensive. It included help with reliable transportation so parents could get to work without depending on unpredictable buses, job training and placement services so they could find better-paying work, scholarship funds for kids who showed academic promise, tutoring and enrichment programs, even help with unexpected emergencies like medical bills, or car repairs that could otherwise destroy a family's stability. But David knew the hardest part wasn't creating the program. It was convincing Rebecca to accept help. He thought about just sending money anonymously, but that felt wrong. It wouldn't help him learn what families needed. It wouldn't create a model that could help others. And honestly, he wanted to do more than write a check. He wanted to be involved, to understand, to make a real difference. On Saturday morning, he drove to the address Patricia had given him. The neighborhood looked different in daylight. Not dangerous, just tired. Buildings that needed paint. Playgrounds with broken equipment. Cars patched together with duct tape and hope. Rebecca's apartment was on the 3rd floor of an old brick building. David climbed the stairs and knocked on the door. When Rebecca answered, her eyes went wide. Mr. David? What are you doing here? I'm sorry to show up like this. Can we talk for a few minutes? Rebecca hesitated, then opened the door wider. The apartment was tiny but spotlessly clean. Sophie was sitting at a small table doing homework, and she looked up with surprise. Hi, Mr. David. Hey, Sophie. Still studying those stars? Always. Rebecca sent the kids to their room and gestured for David to sit at the kitchen table. She looked nervous, like she was expecting bad news. David took a breath. I'm going to be direct. I've been thinking about Sophie since Tuesday. About your situation. And I want to help. Rebecca's face hardened immediately. We don't need charity. I'm not offering charity. Let me explain. David leaned forward. I run a foundation that helps families build better lives. I want to create a new program in this neighborhood, something that actually works. But I don't want to design it from some office downtown. I want to start with one family, learn what really helps, what doesn't work, what we're missing, then use those lessons to help hundreds of other families. And you want us to be your test case. I want you to be my partners. Not just receiving help, but helping me understand what families like yours actually need. Rebecca shook her head. You don't understand. I've worked hard my whole life. I don't take handouts. I'm not offering handouts. David's voice was firm but gentle. Look, can I tell you something I don't usually share? Rebecca nodded slowly. I grew up in foster care. 7 different homes before I turned 16. I wore donated clothes. 8 donated food. I felt invisible, like the world had already decided I didn't matter. David's hands were clasped tight on the table. One teacher changed everything. She saw something in me and helped me get a scholarship. That scholarship led to college, which led to everything else. I got lucky, Rebecca. I got one chance and I took it. All I'm trying to do is give other people that same chance. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. What exactly are you proposing? I want to help with a reliable car so you can get to work. I want to set up education funds for your kids. Get Sophie into science programs where she can reach her potential. But more than that, I want to hire you. Hire me? To work for the foundation. To help design these programs. You know more about surviving on too little money than any consultant I could hire. You understand what policies hurt families and what actually helps? I need that knowledge. I'm a custodian. I clean toilets for a living. You're a mother who's kept 3 kids fed, housed, and thriving on wages that most people couldn't survive on. You're an expert in something most people know nothing about, and that expertise is valuable. Rebecca stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the street below. David could see her shoulders shaking slightly. My husband died because his construction company cut corners on safety equipment, she said quietly. Rich people making decisions that killed working people. And now another rich person shows up at my door wanting to help. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, not yet. David stood too. Trust has to be earned. All I'm asking is that you think about it. Talk to a lawyer if you want. Make sure everything is fair and legal. Set whatever boundaries you need. I just want a chance to prove that not all help comes with strings attached. Rebecca turned around. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. If I do this, my kids come first, always. They don't become poster children for your foundation. No photos, no publicity without my permission. Agreed. And I make real decisions. Not just pretend ones to make you feel good. That's what I'm hoping for. And if it doesn't work out? If I decide this is a mistake, we can walk away. No questions asked? Fair enough. Rebecca looked at him for a long moment. Then she held out her hand. 1-month trial. Let's see if you're serious about this. David shook her hand, feeling like he'd just made the most important deal of his life. From the bedroom, they heard Sophie's voice. Mom, is Mr. David staying for lunch? I want to show him my science project. Rebecca smiled despite herself. He can stay if he wants. David ended up staying for 3 hours. Eating mac and cheese with the kids, helping Sophie build a model solar system, and listening to Rebecca's ideas about what working families really needed. By the time he left, he knew this was going to be harder than he'd imagined, but he also knew it was going to be worth it. The first 2 weeks went better than David expected. His foundation bought a reliable used car for Rebecca, nothing fancy, just a dependable Honda that would get her to work and back. They set up tutoring sessions for Sophie at the local library. They even found Rebecca a better-paying job at the hospital in their administration department, where she could work normal hours and actually see her kids in the evenings. Rebecca was skeptical at first, checking every detail, reading every contract twice. But slowly she started to believe that maybe this was real. Maybe someone actually wanted to help without expecting something in return. Then everything started to fall apart. It began at Sophie's school. One morning, Sophie came home crying, something she almost never did. Rebecca sat her down at the kitchen table, wiping her daughter's tears. What happened, baby? Kelly said, I think I'm better than everyone now. She said I'm a teacher's pet, and that's why I get special tutoring. And then at lunch, nobody wanted to sit with me. Rebecca felt her heart sink. Kelly had been Sophie's best friend since kindergarten. Did you tell Kelly about the tutoring? Sophie shook her head. I didn't tell anyone. But her mom was at the school yesterday, and she was talking really loud to another mom about how it's not fair that some kids get special treatment. Rebecca closed her eyes. She'd been afraid of this. In a neighborhood where everyone struggled, suddenly having help made you stand out. And standing out made you a target, the problems got worse. At work, Rebecca's old supervisor from the custodial department started making comments. Must be nice having rich friends, she'd said in the break room loud enough for everyone to hear. Some of us have to work for everything we get. Rebecca tried to ignore it, but the whispers followed her everywhere. In the grocery store, at the bus stop, at parent-teacher conferences. People looked at her differently now. Some with envy, some with suspicion, a few with outright hostility. Then the neighborhood association meeting happened. David had suggested that Rebecca present the foundation's plans to help other families in the area. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Let people know that help was coming, that this wasn't just about one family. The community center was packed that Tuesday night. Rebecca stood at the front of the room with David sitting in the back, trying not to draw attention. She explained the program, how it would provide job training, childcare support, educational resources. She talked about how they wanted to help families without taking away their dignity or independence. At first, people seemed interested. They asked good questions about eligibility and what kind of support was available. But then a man Rebecca recognized from the neighborhood stood up. Let me get this straight, he said, his voice cutting through the room. Some rich guy decides to play savior in our neighborhood, and we're supposed to be grateful? That's not what this is about, Rebecca started, but the man kept talking. You know what this is? This is gentrification. First, they come in acting all charitable. Then property values go up. Then people like us can't afford to live here anymore. I've seen it happen in 3 other neighborhoods. Other voices joined in. A woman asked why they needed some outsider to fix their problems. Another man questioned David's real motives. Someone suggested this was just a publicity stunt to make him look good. Rebecca tried to defend the program, tried to explain that David genuinely wanted to help, but her voice got lost in the arguing. She looked back at David, and he was sitting very still, his face unreadable. The meeting ended badly, with people leaving angry and divided. Some families signed up for the program. Others walked out shaking their heads. David drove Rebecca home that night. They sat in his car outside her apartment building, neither of them wanting to talk about what had just happened. I'm sorry, David finally said. I didn't think about how this would look to people. It's not your fault, Rebecca said, but her voice was tired. I just didn't realize how complicated this would get. We can stop if you want. I don't want to make things harder for your family. Rebecca thought about Sophie crying at the kitchen table. She thought about the cold stares at the grocery store. She thought about her oldest daughter, Nina, coming home yesterday asking if they were rich now, because kids at school were saying things. I don't know what to do, she admitted. Part of me wants to give all this back and go back to how things were. At least then people weren't angry at us. But things weren't okay before, David said quietly. You were working yourself to death? Your car was broken. Sophie was stuck without opportunities. I know, but at least we weren't alone. Now it feels like the whole neighborhood is against us. Things got even more complicated the next week. A local politician gave a press conference about David's foundation. He didn't mention Rebecca or Sophie by name, but he talked about wealthy outsiders imposing their will on established communities and billionaire savior complexes. The story got picked up by local news, then by blogs and social media. Suddenly, everyone had an opinion about what David was doing. Some praised him. Many criticized him. A few attacked Rebecca for selling out. The worst part was reading the comments online. People who didn't know her, didn't know Sophie, didn't know anything about their lives, all had something to say about their choices. She's just using him for his money. Those kids are going to grow up entitled. Why should they get help when other families are struggling just as much? Rebecca stopped reading after that. But she couldn't stop hearing the whispers at school pickup, at the hospital, everywhere she went. One evening, David came by the apartment unannounced. He looked as tired as Rebecca felt. "I think we need to talk," he said. They sat at the kitchen table again. The same table where this had all started a month ago. The kids were in their room doing homework. "I've been thinking," David said. "Maybe everyone's right. Maybe I was naive about this whole thing. I thought if I had good intentions and genuinely wanted to help, that would be enough. But I didn't consider what it would be like for you and your family to be in the spotlight like this." "It's not just that," Rebecca said. "I've been thinking, too, about what that man said at the meeting, about gentrification and outsiders. And you know what? He's not completely wrong. You are an outsider. You don't live here. You don't know what it's like to worry about making rent or choosing between medicine and groceries." David nodded slowly. "You're right. I don't know those things." "But here's the thing," Rebecca continued, her voice getting stronger. "You're trying to understand. You're listening. You're not just throwing money at us and walking away. And yeah, maybe this is messy and complicated and maybe we're making mistakes. But at least we're trying to do something real. So what do we do?" Rebecca was quiet for a moment, thinking. "We change the approach. You step back from being the face of this. Let community members run the programs. People who actually live here, who understand the problems because they live them every day. And what about you and your family? We stay part of it, but quietly. No more public presentations. No more being the example family. We just live our lives and help design the programs behind the scenes." David considered this. "It's not what I imagined. I thought if we were open and transparent about everything, people would understand. People are complicated, David, when you're struggling. It's hard to watch someone else get help, even if you know they need it too. And it's scary when outsiders come in with big plans, even good plans, because we've been disappointed so many times before. So basically, we need to be less visible but more effective." "Exactly." They talked for another hour, redesigning the program from the ground up. Instead of David's foundation running everything, they would partner with existing community organizations. Instead of publicizing their work, they would operate quietly. Instead of Rebecca being a spokesperson, she would be a consultant working behind the scenes. It wasn't the inspiring story either of them had hoped for. There would be no press conferences about changing lives, no documentary about a billionaire and a struggling family coming together. Just quiet, steady work trying to help people without making things worse. When David finally left that night, Rebecca sat alone in her kitchen for a while. Sophie came out of the bedroom in her pajamas. "Mom, are we still going to be okay?" Rebecca pulled her daughter into a hug. "Yeah, baby. We're going to be okay. It's just going to be more complicated than we thought." "Is Mr. David still going to help us?" "He is, but different than before." "We're going to be smarter about it." Sophie nodded against her mother's shoulder. "Good, because I really like the tutoring. I'm learning so much." Rebecca held her daughter tight, hoping they were making the right choice. Sometimes doing the right thing meant doing it the hard way, the quiet way, the way that nobody noticed or celebrated, but maybe that was okay. Maybe the best kind of help was the kind that happened without fanfare, without cameras, without anyone keeping score. They would find out soon enough. 6 months passed, and things got quieter. Not easier, just quieter. David stopped coming to the neighborhood as much. When he did visit, he drove a regular car instead of his Tesla, wore jeans instead of suits, and met Rebecca at coffee shops on the edge of the neighborhood where people didn't recognize him. They learned to work together differently. More carefully. The foundation partnered with 3 community organizations that had been doing good work for years, but never had enough funding. A job training center run by a woman named Ms. Patterson who'd grown up in the neighborhood. A youth center managed by Coach Williams, a former teacher who knew every kid on the block. A food cooperative started by local families to help each other afford groceries. These weren't David's organizations. They belonged to the community. The foundation just provided money and support, letting the people who actually live there make the decisions. Rebecca worked from home now, consulting for the foundation while still keeping her part-time job at the hospital. She helped design programs based on what she knew families actually needed. Not what sounded good in a grant proposal, but what would actually help people pay their bills and keep their kids fed. Sophie's tutoring moved from the library to the youth center, where other kids also got help with homework. That way, she wasn't the only one getting extra support. Nina and Tyler joined after-school programs there too. Slowly, the Martinez family started to blend back into the community instead of standing out. But just when things seemed to be settling down, Rebecca got a phone call that changed everything. It was from a reporter. A real one from a major news outlet. Miss Martinez? I'm doing a story about billionaire philanthropy, and I'd like to talk to you about your relationship with David Chun and his foundation. Rebecca's hands went cold. How did you get this number? Public records. I've been investigating Mr. Chun's foundation for a few weeks now. I know about the car, the job, the programs. I know he started all of this after meeting your daughter. I just want to hear your side of the story. I have nothing to say. Rebecca hung up. She called David immediately. We have a problem. The reporter didn't give up. She called 3 more times. She showed up at the hospital where Rebecca worked. She even tried to approach Sophie's school, though the principal shut that down fast. Other reporters followed. Not many, but enough. The story was too interesting to ignore. A billionaire tech founder and a single mom from the poorest part of town, working together to fight poverty. It was exactly the kind of heartwarming narrative that people loved to read. Except it wasn't heartwarming for the people living it. The attention started the whispers all over again. People who'd started to forget about Rebecca's connection to David suddenly remembered. The comments came back, the suspicious looks, the cold shoulders at the grocery store. Worse, the reporter found other people to interview. She talked to the man who'd spoken out at the community meeting. She interviewed families who'd applied for help but been turned down because they didn't meet eligibility requirements. She spoke with local politicians who had opinions about private money in public spaces. The article came out on a Thursday morning. Rebecca made herself read the whole thing, even though every paragraph made her feel worse. The headline was, "When Billionaire Help Divides Instead of Unites, One Communities. Complicated Relationship with Private Philanthropy." The article wasn't completely negative. It acknowledged that David's intentions seemed genuine. It noted that some families had been helped. But it focused heavily on the criticism, the division, the questions about whether one person should have so much power to change a community. Rebecca was mentioned by name. So was Sophie, though they didn't use her full name since she was a minor. There were quotes from neighbors saying the Martinez family had gotten special treatment. There were statistics about other families in need who hadn't received help. The worst part was the photo. Someone had taken a picture of David's car parked outside Rebecca's apartment building months ago. It looked exactly like what people feared, a rich man visiting a poor neighborhood, the visual embodiment of inequality. Rebecca called in sick to work that day. She couldn't face people. Sophie came home from school crying again, saying kids were asking if her mom was dating a billionaire. Nina was furious, saying this wasn't fair, they hadn't asked for any of this attention. David came over that evening. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. "I'm so sorry, Rebecca. I never wanted this for your family." Rebecca was too exhausted to be angry. "I know. My lawyers think we should issue a statement. Set the record straight about what we're actually doing. That'll just make it worse. You know that, right? Any statement we make just keeps the story alive." They sat in silence for a while. Tyler was watching cartoons in the living room, blissfully unaware of the chaos around him. Sophie and Nina were in their bedroom, probably reading more articles online, even though Rebecca had told them not to. "Maybe we should stop," Rebecca finally said. "To just end the whole thing." You shut down the programs, I quit consulting, we go back to how things were. Is that what you want? Rebecca thought about the 80 families who'd found better jobs through Miss Patterson's training program. She thought about the 30 kids getting tutoring at the youth center. She thought about the food cooperative that was now serving 200 families every week. No, she admitted, but I don't know how to keep doing this when it keeps hurting my family. David rubbed his face with his hands. I've been thinking about something. What if we made this completely about the community organizations? The foundation gives them large grants, long-term funding commitments, but then we step away entirely. No oversight, no control, just trust them to do the work they've been doing. You just give them money and walk away? Not completely walk away, but stop trying to be involved in every decision. Stop trying to fix everything. Just provide resources and let people who actually know what they're doing take it from there. And what about us, about my family? The support we set up for your family continues, but quietly. The car is already in your name. The education funds for the kids are already established. Your consulting work can continue if you want, but remotely, through intermediaries. We make it so there's no visible connection between you and me. Rebecca wanted to feel relieved, but instead she just felt sad. So we just pretend we don't know each other. Not pretend. Just be more private about it. Rebecca, I made a mistake, thinking that being open about all of this would make it better. I thought transparency would build trust. But sometimes the best way to help is to do it so quietly that nobody notices. That's not the story you wanted to tell, is it? The successful billionaire learning from real people and changing the world? David smiled sadly. No, it's not. But maybe that was never the right story anyway. Maybe the right story is just that things got a little bit better for some people, and nobody really knows why or how or who to thank for it. They talked for another hour, working out the details. The foundation would announce a major grant to the 3 community organizations with no strings attached. David would stop visiting the neighborhood entirely. Rebecca would continue her consulting work, but anonymously, through email and video calls with the foundation staff. It wasn't a clean ending. It wasn't satisfying. There would be no moment where everyone understood what they were trying to do and celebrated them for it. But maybe that was okay. A week later, the foundation made the announcement. 3 community organizations receiving multi-year grants totaling $5 million. Miss Patterson cried when she heard the news. Coach Williams called it a miracle. The food cooperative could finally afford a permanent building. David's name was in the press release, but Rebecca's wasn't. The article mentioned that the grants were inspired by conversations with community members, but no one was named specifically. Some reporters tried to dig deeper, to find the personal story behind the grants, but there wasn't much to find anymore. Just a foundation doing what foundations do, giving money to good causes. Rebecca read the news coverage online, feeling a strange mixture of relief and disappointment. They'd done something good, they'd helped people, but nobody would ever really know the whole story of how it happened. The mistakes they'd made, the lessons they'd learned. Sophie came and sat next to her on the couch. Mom, Kelly talked to me at school today. Oh, yeah, what did she say? She said she was sorry for being mean. Her mom told her she was wrong to judge us. That's good, baby. She asked if we could be friends again. I said yes. Rebecca hugged her daughter close. Maybe this was what success actually looked like. Not headlines or recognition, but small moments of repair and reconciliation. Kids being friends again. Communities getting resources they needed. People's lives getting just a little bit better. It wasn't the story anyone would write a book about. But it was real, and it was theirs, and maybe that was enough. David sent her a text message that night. Just 4 words. Thank you for everything. Rebecca texted back, we did something good. And they had, even if nobody would ever fully understand what it cost them to do it. 3 years passed like water flowing downstream. Steady and constant. Sophie was 10 now, in 5th grade, and something remarkable had happened. She'd won a regional science competition with a project about solar energy and water purification. The prize was a full scholarship to a prestigious summer science camp. When she'd called David to tell him, Her voice was so excited he could barely understand her words. "I did it, Mr. David. I actually won." They said my project was the most innovative they'd seen from someone my age. David smiled, sitting in his office downtown, looking out at the city. "I never doubted you for a second, Sophie. You've always had something special. Will you come to the award ceremony?" "It's next Saturday," David hesitated. They'd agreed 3 years ago to keep their distance publicly, but this was Sophie's moment, and he'd been there at the beginning. "If your mom says it's okay, I'll be there." The ceremony was held at the University Science Building. David sat in the back row, wearing a regular jacket and jeans, nothing that would draw attention. He watched Sophie walk across the stage, too. Receive her award, her smile so bright it could power a city. Rebecca sat in the front row with Nina and Tyler, clapping louder than anyone else. After the ceremony, they met outside in the parking lot. "You came?" Rebecca said, and David noticed she looked different. More confident somehow, more settled. "I wouldn't have missed it. How are you doing?" "Good, really good, actually," Rebecca smiled. "I got promoted last month. I'm coordinating all the community health outreach programs at the hospital now. Turns out my experience with your foundation made me pretty good at understanding what communities need." That's amazing. And guess what? Miss Patterson's job training program has placed over 300 people in stable employment. Coach Williams opened a second youth center on the other side of the neighborhood. The food cooperative is talking about expanding to 2 more locations. David felt something warm in his chest. That's what I'd hoped for. Sophie ran up to them, still holding her award. "Mr. David, did you see? Did you see me win? I saw everything. I'm so proud of you. I want to be an engineer now. Not just an astronaut, but an engineer who builds things that help people. Like water purification systems for places that don't have clean water. That's a beautiful goal, Sophie. Mom says I can do anything if I work hard enough. And she says you help make that possible, even though you don't like to talk about it." David glanced at Rebecca, who just shrugged with a small smile. They walked together to a nearby park, sitting on benches while the kids played on the playground. It felt natural, comfortable, like old friends who didn't need to fill every silence with words. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said after a while. "Do you ever regret how everything turned out? All the criticism, the problems, the way we had to hide everything?" David thought about it. "Sometimes. I used to imagine this would be a story with a clear, happy ending. Hero meets struggling family, changes their lives, everyone learns something, roll credits. But real life isn't like that. No, it's not. But here's what I don't regret," David continued. "I don't regret stopping that day at the bus stop. I don't regret getting to know your family. I don't regret helping even when it got messy. Because look at where we are now. Sophie's going to change the world someday. You're helping hundreds of families through your work. The community organizations are thriving. That matters more than any story we could tell about it." Rebecca nodded slowly. "I think I finally understand what you were trying to do from the beginning. You weren't trying to save us. You were trying to open doors. And you taught me that opening doors isn't enough. You have to make sure people are ready to walk through them, that the community supports them when they do, that there's something good on the other side." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Sophie show Tyler how to pump his legs on the swing to go higher. "There's something I need to tell you," Rebecca said. "I've been asked to speak at a conference next month about community-based support programs. They want me to talk about what works and what doesn't based on my experience. Are you going to mention the foundation?" "Mention me?" "I'm going to tell the truth. That a chance encounter led to a complicated partnership that made mistakes but also helped people. That private philanthropy can work, but only if the people with money are willing to listen to the people without it. That good intentions aren't enough, but they're a start. People are going to have opinions about that. Let them. I spent too long worrying about what other people think. I know what we did help people. I know it wasn't perfect. I can live with both of those things being true." David felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying for 3 years. "You're braver than me. No, I'm just tired of hiding. Besides, I think people need to hear the real story, not the fairy tale version. They need to know that helping each other is hard and complicated and doesn't always look the way we think it should. A few weeks later, David watched Rebecca's conference presentation online. She was articulate and honest, talking about both the successes and failures of the past 3 years. She mentioned David by name, but not as a savior or a villain. Just as a person who tried to help and learned along the way. Just like she did, the presentation went viral, but not in the way the first article had. This time, people engaged with the complexity. They asked questions about how to replicate the model. They wanted to know more about community-led philanthropy. They discussed the importance of listening to people with lived experience. David got emails from other foundations asking for advice. Rebecca got job offers from nonprofits across the country, but she turned them all down. She was happy where she was, doing work that mattered in the place she called home. 6 months after that, David visited the neighborhood for the first time in years. Not secretly, not hiding, just visiting. He met with Miss Patterson to hear about the job training program. He toured Coach Williams's new youth center. He ate lunch at the food cooperative and talked with the families there about what was working and what still needed improvement. People recognized him, but the energy was different now. Not hostile, not worshipful, just normal. Some thanked him. Some ignored him. One elderly woman told him he should have done more for senior services, and he promised to look into it. It felt right somehow. Being just another person trying to help instead of being either a hero or a problem. That evening, he had dinner at Rebecca's apartment. The same small kitchen table where this had all started, but the apartment was different now. There was a new couch, a computer for the kids, artwork on the walls. Signs of a family that was doing more than just surviving. Nina was in high school now, talking about becoming a teacher. Tyler was reading books 2 grades above his level. And Sophie, brilliant Sophie, was already taking advanced science courses and talking about college like it was a real possibility, not just a dream. You know what's funny? Rebecca said as they cleaned up after dinner. I used to think the most important thing you did was give us money and opportunities. But looking back, I think the most important thing was just stopping that day. Seeing Sophie. Seeing us. Actually paying attention when most people would have just driven past. David helped dry the dishes, thinking about that rainy afternoon that felt like a lifetime ago. I almost didn't stop. I was busy, had meetings, had 100 things on my mind. But something made me look up at the right moment. I'm glad you did. Me too. Sophie came out of her bedroom carrying a notebook filled with sketches and calculations. Mr. David, want to see my designs for a portable water filtration system? I've been working on it all week. David looked at the detailed drawings, the careful notes, the brilliant mind of a 10-year-old girl who once sat alone at a bus stop in the rain. Show me everything. As Sophie explained her project with enthusiasm and confidence, David realized this was the happy ending after all. Not the neat, simple one he'd imagined, but something better. Something real. A girl who'd been invisible was now impossible to ignore. Not because of charity or pity, but because of her own remarkable talent and determination. A mother who'd been exhausted and struggling now helped other families find their way. A community that had been divided was now stronger, with resources and programs that would outlast any single person's involvement, and a man who thought he knew how to help had learned that the best thing you can do for someone isn't to save them. It's to see them, to listen to them, and to walk beside them while they save themselves. The rain still fell sometimes on Maple Street. Kids still waited at bus stops for rides that occasionally ran late. Life was still hard for a lot of families in the neighborhood, but now there were more people watching. More people ready to stop and help, more people who understood that changing the world doesn't happen in grand gestures. It happens in small moments of connection, in quiet acts of support, in the daily work of people who care enough to show up and do the hard, complicated work of helping each other. And sometimes it all starts with one person deciding to stop their car and ask a child in the rain, "Are you okay?" Because that simple question, asked with genuine concern, can change everything.